Palestinians salvaging what they can after Israeli forces continue to destroy residential buildings in Gaza City over the weekend, which they claim hide Hamas infrastructure. Dozens more have been killed, and the latest strikes have prompted thousands to flee ahead of an expected ground offensive to seize the city, congesting this coastal highway. Though Israeli Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir has told a parliamentary committee, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has not given the army clear guidance on what comes next for the territory.
It's been 2 years. Next month it'll be 2 years. No one is finding a solution. Even the United States is not standing on our side. On screen is different than behind the scenes. What can we do? We only have God to stand with us.
We've begun to wish for death. Death rather than this life we live today. Our young men have had their limbs amputated. Our women have become widows. Our children have become orphans. Our lives have become hell. Today we live in hell. In hell. Where is religion, Islam and Muslims? Where are the Christians?
6 days after Israel's airstrikes on Hamas's leadership in Qatar, which killed 5 but spared the negotiating team, an emergency meeting of Arab and Islamic states is taking place in its capital, Doha. Representatives from over 50 countries, including Saudi Arabia, Libya and notably Iran, are reportedly drafting a resolution condemning what they describe as Israel's hostile acts, including genocide, ethnic cleansing and starvation, which they say threaten the prospects of peace and coexistence. It's unclear what practical action Arab and Islamic states might take, but it's thought any kind of military response is out of the question. Israel has strongly denied all of these allegations, but is increasingly isolated on the international stage. But relations between the US and Israel have never been stronger, according to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's currently visiting the country for meetings with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
As far as the President's been clear on the ongoing issues in Gaza, and that is that every single hostage, both living and deceased, needs to be home immediately. Hamas can no longer continue to exist as an armed element that threatens the peace and security, not just of Israel, but of the world.
Nevertheless, Rubio has said President Trump did not like the way Israel's attack on Qatar went down. Despite the criticism, Netanyahu refused to rule out further strikes on Hamas leaders abroad.
Terrorists happened to be on that soil, and we acted, which is what democracies do, including the leading democracy, when they have the ability to target terrorists to threaten their civilians. So this is a principle we established. It's a principle we follow. It hasn't changed.
On Sunday, Trump tried to smooth over relations with Qatar, home of the US's biggest military base in the Middle East.
Qatar's been a very great ally. So Israel and everybody else, we have to be careful. When we attack people, we have to be careful.
Israel is experiencing a backlash on an increasing number of fronts. Spain is one of a growing number of countries now threatening to boycott the Eurovision Song Contest should Israel be included in the 2026 competition. While in its capital, Madrid, pro-Palestinian protesters forced the finale of the Tour of Spain cycle race to be abandoned on Sunday after they blocked the route over the inclusion of an Israeli team. Direct action which drew praise from Spanish actor Javier Bardem at the Emmys. There was further condemnation of Israel's actions from Jewish actress Hannah Einbinder after she collected an award.
For many reasons, I feel like it is my obligation as a Jewish person to distinguish Jews from the state of Israel.
Undeterred by reports of drone attacks on vessels last week, a flotilla of aid ships has set off for Gaza from the Greek island of Soros, aiming to break Israel's blockade and establish a humanitarian corridor. Their efforts may, though, be increasingly futile. Across the Mediterranean, Israel felled Gaza City's tallest building this morning, yet more rubble in a territory whose infrastructure is almost gone. Palestinians, stuck in the deteriorating conditions, left once again to wait for leaders in meeting rooms and summit halls beyond their borders to decide their fates. Well, to discuss the latest from the Middle East, we're joined now by Yossi Meckelberg, Senior Consulting Fellow with the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House. Yossi, thank you for speaking with us today. Firstly, how significant is this meeting of Arab and Muslim nations in Qatar?
Thank you for having me. I think it's a very important summit. I think there is real anger. There's not only Arab countries, Middle Eastern countries, there are also Muslim countries like Pakistan, for instance, and there is a real further when it comes to Israel attack on Doha. This is an exception in the sense that Qatar is not an enemy country. Qatar, there was never attack from Qatar soil on Israel. Qatar is the mediator for ceasefire. It was also attack on a group of Hamas leaders that were actually discussing the terms of a ceasefire. And let alone, I mean, Qatar is also an ally of the United States, host of its biggest military base outside the United States. Now, there is a real sense in the Middle East, if Israel can attack Qatar in the middle of such a sensitive negotiation that's supposed also to bring hostages, Israeli hostages back, who is next and under what condition Israel will try to use military force against other countries in the region.
A big gathering of leaders, a lot of anger expressed, but why are they likely drawing a line at a cable today and not more direct action?
Well, we'll see what the exact decisions going to come out of it. But I think it's part of an accumulated anger towards the way that Israel behaves in Gaza, in the West Bank, to a large degree also in Syria and in other countries. It's the idea that Israel under Netanyahu, under the right-wing, ultra-right-wing government right now in Israel, it says only one modus operandi, which is using force, and diplomacy always sideline. In this case, not even consulting its closest ally, the United States. You know, we know that among the people of the Middle East, there are a lot of anger of not stopping the war in Gaza and then the mass killing there of Palestinians, while Israel already in the process of taking over Gaza City, which no one knows how many casualties as a result. We saw the starvation in Gaza. This adds to this. It's added the attack on a country, again, that is mediating ceasefire, not involved in a war in the sense of attacking Israel, and that leaves the region in a real state of disarray where Israel is going to attack next. Already we know that 2 years ago, countries like Saudi Arabia were discussing normalization, at least behind closed doors, about normalization with Israel. Only the future normalization has been delayed. And I think there is a constant erosion in relation with countries like Egypt and Jordan that already signed peace agreements, or countries like the UAE and Bahrain that normalized relations some time ago.
And how much damage has Israel done with relations to the populations in its neighbors that might mean that those countries that were planning on closer ties, normalizing relations, that sets it back for another generation?
The anger, it's reached boiling level. If you ask probably the average person in the Middle East what they should government do, they probably, again, rightly or wrongly, but they will recommend to sever diplomatic relations, those who signed, or to take harsher measures when it comes, as long as Israel behaves the way it behaves in Gaza. It's probably not going to happen, but the pressure on government is mounting all the time.
Well, crossing the Atlantic, President Trump has let it be known he's unhappy with how the Israeli government conducted the airstrikes on Qatar. He's already expressed frustration with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after those strikes on Iran. How strong is the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu at the moment?
Well, now it seems that the relation between Netanyahu and Trump, Israel and the United States hold. And again, it's not enough when we're talking about, that Trump is unhappy, or he said that it was not a wise move for Israel to attack Doha. And as we speak, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is visiting Israel and had a meeting with Netanyahu. And they're still using very mild criticism when it comes to the attack on Doha. which again is an ally of an important ally of the United States. We all know that the United States wanted this war come to an end. It will take a phone call from Trump to Netanyahu, and it will make a huge difference. But it doesn't seem that this phone call is forthcoming, and the relations stand as it is. And Trump said time and again that he probably allow Israel, so to speak, finish the job of eliminating Hamas. The problem is that it's an unachievable as such objective, but even worse than that, how many innocent people will pay with their life as a result of that?
And in terms of Gaza, there were more demolitions of residential buildings over the weekend, which Israel claims house Hamas infrastructure. But the Israeli army chief, Eyal Zamir, has told a parliamentary committee this morning he's not been given clear guidance on what's next for the Strip. How much support is there in Israel for an incursion into Gaza City without a plan for what follows?
We know that most Israelis would like their top priority is to see the hostages back, to reach a ceasefire. There is a real fatigue in Israel, this war. It's nearly 2 years since this war started. And regardless of the terrible massacre of Hamas on October 7, what has followed can't be justified. Killing more than 60,000, 64,000 people, Palestinians there. The displacement, the starvation, the destruction. And from a military point of view, the army is confused what it is expected. We know that Chief of Staff Zamir said when the cabinet discussed a few weeks ago, entering into Gaza City, he was against it. He said to the cabinet, it's going to put the hostages at risk. It probably will lead to committing more war crimes. And at the end of the day, leading a country, a military, that's basically based on conscripts, on reservists, into another such huge operation, not necessarily would achieve its objective, while falling out with the rest of the international community and the goodwill, whether it's the mediators, Qatar and Egypt and the rest of the international community. So I think the priority also for the army is to a ceasefire and see the hostages back.
Yossi Meckelberg, Senior Consulting Fellow with the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House. Thank you very much.
Thank you.